Hello friends, this is Rishabh and I welcome you to yet another video of the Python-verse series. Now that we have covered some basics of the if-else statements, we have covered the decision making part and we have covered the repetition part, that is using for loop and while loop, we are ready to solve one of the interesting challenges. Now this is I have named it the Python-verse problem. You will see the variations of this problem and some tweaks to this general problem. So it says, let me read through the statement of this problem. It says that print all the numbers from 1 to 200, print Python if the number is divisible by 3, print verse if the number is divisible by 5, and print Python verse if the number is divisible by both 3 and 5. Before I start solving this problem, I would like to share an interesting insight with all of you. When I first came across this problem, I read that it can be used to eliminate 80% of the candidates in an interview. So not it can be, but it is actually used to eliminate candidates in the interviews. I was shocked at this number because to me the problem seemed quite easy when I read through the statement. Then over the years, I used it in more than 100 interviews. Whenever I had to interview candidates, I used some variation of this problem or exactly this problem. And I realized that the statistic which I had heard, it was actually higher than 80%, because I realized that 85 to 90% of candidates face some problem while solving this challenge. The reason is that this problem appears to be very simple, but it has got some failure points, some very small little failure points that candidates end up missing, maybe because of the pressure of the interview or maybe because they haven't seen that problem before. So it's important that we understand what kind of failure points do exist in this problem. So yes, let's start solving this problem. I think the very first step which we should do is we should break this problem into different steps. So let me do that first. So let's see what are the steps. So let's write the steps here. Now if we see, and this is a general practice you should follow while solving any problems, you should try to break it as much as you can. So it says that print all the numbers from 1 to 200. We have to print all the numbers from 1 to 200. And the concept which should come to your mind is either for loop or a while loop. Right. Now print Python if the number is divisible by 3, which means that if the number is divisible by 3, you don't have to print the number, but you have to print Python, right? Now if I go ahead, it says print verse if the number is divisible by 5. So if the number is divisible by 5, then we don't have to print the number, we have to print verse, right? And print Python verse if the number is divisible by both 3 and 5. So we have to print Python verse if the number is divisible by both 3 and 5, right? Now let's see how exactly we can write the code for this problem. So I already have this python-verse.py class initialized. I wrote some code, I'll just delete it. Cool. So now let me just make a small, in a commented form I can write this. Cool. So now let's start writing the code for this. So for I in range, now I'll try to make some errors in the first version. Then I will run this program to show you what kind of errors can happen, what are the different failure points, and then we will go on to correct the code, right? You can also try to figure out what kind of errors am I making, right? So print all the numbers from 1 to 200. So let me just write it down, 1 to 200, right? It says print Python if the number is divisible by 3. If I%3 equals 0, print Python. Simple, right? It says print verse if the number is divisible by 5. If I%5 equals 0, I have to print verse, right? Okay. If I%3 equals 0, and we have covered operators. I hope you understand why we are using and here. And I%5 equals 0, print Python verse. So this is the requirement, and this is the very first code which comes to anybody's mind. So there may be errors in this code, but that we will only see when we execute it. Now if you have observed this code, Before I execute, you can probably pause the video, you can go through this code again, try to figure out errors, and you can write them down on your wherever you're taking the notes, so that later on when we correct them, it's clear to you, right? Okay, now let me try to run this code. I would say video number 9, and it's python-verse.py. So let's just execute this code. Interesting, we can see some interesting results over here. Now the very first thing, okay, this is one of the first things we missed. If you see, this is not what we were anticipating. Now the very first thing which is wrong here is that we missed the very first step, print all the numbers from 1 to 200. We have taken care of the conditions, but we haven't printed the numbers. Cool. So which means we need an else statement as well. That's the first point of failure, that sometimes we end up missing the crux of the story, wherein we have to print at least all the numbers when there is none of the conditions. When they are satisfied, we have to print the numbers, right? Okay, let me save it, let me run it again. Now it's quite interesting. The very first error we can already observe, 200 is not printed. This is another point of failure which does exist when we are using the range function. As we have discussed in the earlier videos, that the endpoint, it's not included. We will always have to use, let's say, so this specific number is not included. So if I want the range till 200, I'll have to do it 201, right? Okay, other than that, let's look at the output from the beginning and let's see whether everything is correct. Now if you notice, we don't see any Python verse, we only see Python. Sometimes we see verse, but we haven't seen any Python verse. So what could be wrong here? That is the another point of interest for us. Now if you see, after 14 we had to have Python verse, because 15 is divisible by both 3 and 5, but we are only seeing Python here. So which means there is some error in the code. So 1, 2, then Python, 4, then verse, 6 is Python, 7, 8, 9 is Python, 10 verse is fine, 11, 12 Python is fine, 13, 14. For 15 we were anticipating Python verse, but what we saw is Python. Now this is where the interesting part comes. So whenever there is a number which is divisible by both 3 and 5, why exactly we are never reaching Python verse? Because the number is both divisible by both 3 and 5. Whenever the code comes to line number 12, this condition becomes true, which means if i% 3 equals 0 and it prints Python, it never reaches this condition. So what it shows us is that sometimes we have to be very careful in the way we are using the control structures, right? Here the lesson is that the first thing which we need to check is if both the numbers, if it is divisible by both 3 and 5. That is the first condition which we need to check, and later on we have to check for things like i% 3 and i% 5. So this is the error, like this is another failure point. One is in the range function and the other one is here. So let me just correct this. So this is the thing which I need to move on the top. So if i% 3 equals 0 and i% 5 equals 0, then I have to print Python verse, right? Elif i% 5 equals 0, then I have to print verse. And now elif i% 3 equals 0, then I have to print only Python, right? And else I can print I. So now let us just run this again. Now there is something very interesting. So for 200, verse is printed because it is divisible by 5, which is correct. 199, 198 is Python because it is divisible by 3, and similarly for 195 because it is divisible by both. That's why we are seeing Python verse. Now let's start from the beginning as well and check the output once again. Okay, so 1, 2 and Python because of this, right? Then 4, then 5 verse is fine, 6 Python is fine, 9, 10, okay, 11, 12, 13, 14, and for 15 now we can see Python verse. Let's check for 30 as well. We are getting Python verse, and for 45 also we are getting python-verse. So now the code is working as it should. So you can see that it is very important that whenever we are using the control structures, we have to be very careful in where exactly we are using them, right? And that can actually change the whole problem completely, and the meaning can actually change. So that is why I wanted to discuss this problem, and there is one more thing which this problem basically introduces us to, that how exactly we can use both these control structures together, that is for, if, elif and else. And similar is the case with while also. We can use the same with while as well. I hope you enjoyed solving this problem, and we will solve more problems also in order to understand these control structures better and in order to understand Python better in general. So yeah, that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.